The laughter still echoed in Eli's ears, sharp as shattered glass, as he stood outside the community center in Willow Creek, Pennsylvania. 15 years ago, he'd been 16, trembling in this very parking lot, his tears soaking the collar of his thrift store shirt while his classmates jeered, their voices a cruel chorus branding him for who he loved. Now, at 31, Eli Carter was back, and the weight of their mockery felt like a phantom limb, gone but aching. He tightened his grip on the leather notebook in his hand, its pages filled with sketches of a life he'd clawed his way toward. The community center's faded sign loomed above, the same one he'd stared at as a teenager while his heart broke. Back then, Willow Creek had been a cage, its small-town streets suffocating with judgment. Eli had been the skinny kid with two big dreams, the one who loved musicals and boys and dared to say both out loud. The town hadn't been ready for him. Neither had his family. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Eli's boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the center's entrance, his pulse quickening. Tonight was the town's annual fundraiser, a self-congratulatory event where Willow Creek's elite patted themselves on the back for community spirit. Eli wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for closure and maybe a little revenge. Inside, the gymnasium buzzed with chatter. Folding tables lined the walls, draped in cheap tablecloths and littered with raffle tickets and bake sale cookies. Eli scanned the crowd, recognizing faces that had aged but not softened. There was Sarah Klein, once the cheerleader who'd spat the word faggot like it was venom, now a realtor with a fake smile plastered across her face. Over by the punch bowl stood Marcus Reed, the former football star who'd shoved Eli into lockers for sport, now balding and selling insurance. And in the corner, whispering to a group of women, was Mrs. Hargrove, the English teacher who'd looked the other way when Eli's essays about love were defaced with slurs. Eli's chest tightened, but he forced himself to breathe. He wasn't that scared kid anymore. He'd built something they couldn't touch. In New York, he'd turned his love for design into a career, crafting stage sets for Broadway shows that left audiences breathless. He'd found love, too, with Javier, a painter whose warm hands and quiet strength had taught Eli what home could feel like. But Willow Creek didn't know that Eli. To them, he was still the boy they'd laughed at when he cried. Eli Carter. A voice called, skeptical but curious. It was Jenna Patel, one of the few who'd never joined the taunts. She'd been a quiet girl, always sketching in the back of art class, and now she stood before him, her hijab framing a kind face. "I heard you were back. What brings you here?" Eli offered a small smile, careful not to reveal too much. "Unfinished business," he said, his voice steady but laced with something darker. Jenna tilted her head, sensing the weight behind his words, but before she could press further, the microphone crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mayor Thompson, a barrel-chested man with a politician's grin, took the stage. "Welcome to our 15th annual Willow Creek fundraiser. Tonight, we celebrate our town's heart and raise funds to keep our community center thriving." The crowd clapped politely, but Eli's eyes drifted to the banner behind the mayor. "Save our center." The building was falling apart, leaky roof, cracked walls, a heating system that groaned like it was dying. The town needed a miracle, or at least a deep pocket. Eli's lips twitched. He knew something they didn't. As the mayor droned on, Eli's mind wandered to the house on Maple Hill. It was the crown jewel of Willow Creek, a sprawling modern estate with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the valley. Everyone dreamed of living there, but only the wealthy could afford it. Sarah Klein had been trying to sell it for years, her signs dotting the lawn like desperate flags. Eli had bought it last month, cash, no questions asked. He hadn't told a soul. The memory of that purchase warmed him like whiskey. He'd stood in the empty living room, Javier at his side, and felt the weight of his past lift just a little. The house wasn't just a home, it was a statement. He'd turned their laughter into silence, their cruelty into a footnote. But he wasn't done yet. "Eli, you okay?" Jenna's voice pulled him back. She was watching him, her brow furrowed. "You look like you're plotting something." He chuckled, the sound low and private. "Maybe I am." The fundraiser dragged on, with speeches and raffles and small talk that grated on Eli's nerves. He kept to the edges, observing, waiting. Then Sarah Klein approached, her heels clicking like a metronome. "Eli Carter," she said, her tone syrupy but sharp. "Never thought I'd see you back here. What's it been, 15 years? Give or take," Eli replied, meeting her gaze. Her eyes flicked over him, taking in his tailored jacket, the quiet confidence he'd earned. She didn't like it. "Heard you're some big-shot designer now," she said, fishing. "New York, right? Must be nice to escape this little town." Eli's smile was a blade. "I didn't escape. I outgrew it." Her lips tightened, but before she could respond, the mayor's voice boomed again. "Folks, we have an exciting announcement. A generous donor has stepped forward to save our community center." The crowd murmured, heads turning. Eli felt every eye in the room shift, though they didn't know it was him. Not yet. "Who is it?" someone shouted. The mayor grinned, milking the moment. "You'll meet them soon. For now, let's just say Willow Creek's got a guardian angel." Eli's heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. This was his moment, the first step in rewriting his story. He'd spent years dreaming of this, walking back into Willow Creek not as the boy they broke, but as the man who'd bought their dreams out from under them. Jenna leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Eli, is that you?" He didn't answer, but the glint in his eyes said enough. Tonight, he'd start tearing down the walls they'd built around him. And by the time he was done, they'd all know his name. The gymnasium's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the faces around Eli. He stood near the back, his notebook now tucked into his jacket, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. The mayor's words hung in the air, a guardian angel, and the crowd's curiosity was a living thing, pulsing through the room. Eli hadn't planned to reveal himself tonight. He'd wanted to savor the secret a little longer, let it simmer like a slow-burning fuse. But Sarah Klein's smug glance and Marcus Reed's booming laugh from across the room were unraveling his patience. They didn't know he'd bought the Maple Hill house, didn't know he'd written a check to save their precious community center. They still saw the boy who'd cried in the parking lot, not the man who'd built an empire out of their scorn. Jenna nudged him, her eyes bright with suspicion. "You're not just here for the cookies, are you?" she said, nodding toward the dessert table. Her tone was light, but her gaze was sharp, like she could see the gears turning in his head. Eli's lips curved. "Cookies are a bonus." Before she could press further, the mayor clapped his hands, drawing attention back to the stage. "Folks, let's hear it for our volunteers who've kept this center alive." He gestured to a group of familiar faces, including Mrs. Hargrove, who waved primly. The crowd applauded, but Eli's hands stayed still. He remembered her tolerance, well, her silence when his classmates scrawled slurs across his locker, her insistence that he not make a fuss when he begged for help. He leaned toward Jenna, keeping his voice low. "How's the town been since I left?" She hesitated, glancing around as if the walls might eavesdrop. "Better in some ways, worse in others. The center's been a lifeline for kids, art programs, support groups. But people like Sarah and Marcus, they haven't changed much. Still run the show, still think they own the place." Eli nodded, his jaw tight. He'd seen their type in New York, too. People who wielded influence like a blunt weapon, cloaking their prejudice in smiles and charity. But he wasn't here to fight ghosts. He was here to rewrite the narrative. The evening wore on, and Eli drifted through the crowd, catching snippets of conversation. Sarah was pitching the Maple Hill house to a couple in their 50s, her voice dripping with false warmth. "It's a once-in-a-lifetime property," she said, unaware that Eli was listening. "Perfect for a family with vision." He almost laughed. She'd been furious when the sale went through without her commission, the buyer's identity hidden behind a lawyer's name. Marcus, meanwhile, was holding court by the raffle table, regaling a group with stories of his high school glory days. Eli caught his eye for a moment, and Marcus faltered, his laugh dying. Recognition flickered, then dismissal. To Marcus, Eli was still nobody. As the night neared its end, the mayor called for final remarks. Eli's pulse quickened. This was it. He stepped forward, raising a hand. "Mind if I say a few words?" The room stilled. Heads turned, whispers rippling. The mayor blinked, caught off guard, but recovered quickly. Eli Carter, everyone. Sure, son, come on up. Eli climbed the stage, his movements deliberate. The microphone felt cold in his hand, but his voice was steady. 15 years ago, I stood outside this building, crying because I didn't fit in, because I was gay, and this town made sure I knew it. The crowd shifted, some faces uncomfortable, others curious. Sarah's smile froze. Marcus crossed his arms, his jaw tight. I left Willow Creek, Eli continued, but I carried it with me. The laughter, the whispers, the way you looked the other way when I needed help. He paused, letting the words settle. But I came back, and I'm the one who wrote the check to save this place. Gasps rippled through the room. Jenna's eyes widened, a grin tugging at her lips. Sarah's face drained of color, and Marcus looked like he'd swallowed glass. I bought the Maple Hill house, too, Eli added, his voice calm but unyielding. And I'm not here to gloat. I'm here because this town can be better. For the kids who feel like I did, who need a place to belong. I'm giving you a chance to prove it. The silence was deafening. Then Jenna started clapping, slow and deliberate, and others joined, hesitant at first, then louder. Not everyone clapped. Sarah and Marcus stood frozen, but it was enough. Eli stepped off the stage, his heart pounding but lighter than it had been in years. Jenna caught his arm. You're insane, she said, laughing. And amazing. He shrugged, but his eyes were bright. Just getting started. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah approached, her face a mask of forced civility. That was dramatic, she said. But let's talk business. The Maple Hill house. Any chance you're looking to rent? Eli's smile was cold. Oh, I'm renting it. To the right people. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Eli turned away, his mind already on the next step. He'd bought their dream house, saved their center, and now he'd make them live in the world he was building, one where no one laughed at a kid for being themselves. The morning after the fundraiser, Willow Creek buzzed with gossip. Eli's announcement had spread like wildfire, twisting through coffee shops and group chats. By noon, his phone was flooded with messages, some congratulatory, others skeptical, a few outright hostile. He ignored them all, sitting in the Maple Hill house's sunlit kitchen, sipping coffee with Javier. You shook them up, Javier said, his dark eyes warm but teasing. He leaned against the counter, paint-splattered jeans hugging his frame, a canvas of his latest work propped nearby. I could feel the room shift when you spoke. Eli traced the rim of his mug, a faint smile playing on his lips. Good. They've been comfortable too long. Javier crossed the room, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. You sure about this? Stirring up a town like this, it's not just about you anymore. It's about us. Eli met his gaze, the weight of Javier's words settling in. They'd built a life together in New York, late nights in their cramped apartment, laughing over takeout, dreaming of a future where they could be themselves without apology. Moving to Willow Creek, even part-time, was a gamble. But Eli wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the kid he'd been, for the kids still here, hiding who they were. I'm sure, Eli said, his voice soft but firm. This place needs to change, and I've got the keys to make it happen. Javier squeezed his shoulder, then returned to his canvas, leaving Eli to his thoughts. The house around them was a marvel, open spaces, sleek lines, a testament to Eli's success. But it was also a weapon. Renting it out wasn't just about money. It was about control. He'd decide who lived here, who got to bask in the dream he'd claimed. By afternoon, Eli was at the community center, meeting with the board to finalize his donation. The room was tense, filled with faces that hadn't expected him to hold such power. Mrs. Hargrove sat at the head of the table, her lips pursed. Your generosity is unexpected, she said, her tone clipped. But we'll need to discuss how the funds are allocated. Eli leaned back, his expression neutral. The funds come with conditions. The center starts a real inclusivity program, support groups for queer kids, anti-bullying training, the works. I'm not here to patch your roof and call it a day. The board members exchanged glances. A man in an ill-fitting suit, Mr. Dawson, a local banker, cleared his throat. That's a big ask, Eli. This town's traditional. People might push back. Then let them, Eli said, his voice like steel. I'm not asking for permission. The meeting stretched on, arguments flaring and subsiding. Eli held his ground, his years in New York's cutthroat theater world giving him an edge. By the end, the board agreed to his terms, though some faces were sour. As he left, Mrs. Hargrove caught his arm. "You're stirring up trouble, Eli. Be careful." He looked at her, unflinching. "Trouble's already here, Mrs. Hargrove. I'm just shining a light on it." Outside, the air was sharp, the sky a bruised purple. Eli's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah Klein. "Heard you're renting the Maple Hill place. Let's meet. I've got tenants who'd kill for it." He smirked, pocketing the phone without replying. Sarah didn't know it yet, but her top clients, Marcus Reed and his wife, among others, were about to learn who really held the cards. Eli drove to the house, his mind racing. He'd already started vetting potential tenants through his lawyer, prioritizing families who'd support the center's new programs. Marcus and Sarah, with their history of entitlement, wouldn't make the cut, but he wanted them to apply, to feel the sting of rejection. That evening, Javier cooked dinner, spicy tacos, their favorite, and they ate on the porch, the valley sprawling below. "You're playing a dangerous game," Javier said, his voice gentle but serious. "These people, they don't like being challenged." Eli set his plate down, his eyes on the horizon. "They laughed when I cried, Javi. They don't get to laugh anymore." The next day, Sarah showed up at the house unannounced, her smile as brittle as ever. "Eli, let's talk business," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "The Reeds want this place. They're offering top dollar to rent." Eli crossed his arms, leaning against the kitchen island. "I'm picky about tenants. They need to align with my values." Sarah's smile faltered. "Values? Come on, Eli, this is Willow Creek. People like Marcus, they're the backbone of this town." "They're the backbone of its problems," Eli shot back. "I'm renting to people who'll make this place better, not keep it stuck in the past." Her eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in power. "You're making enemies, you know that?" Eli shrugged, his voice calm but cutting. "I've had worse." Sarah left, her heels clicking angrily on the hardwood. Eli watched her go, feeling the first real spark of satisfaction since he'd returned. This was just the beginning. The weeks that followed were a quiet war. Willow Creek's rumor mill churned, splitting the town into camps. Those who saw Eli as a hero, and those who saw him as an outsider stirring trouble. Graffiti appeared on the community center's wall one night. "Go back to New York," but it was painted over by mourning, Jenna, and a group of teens wielding rollers in defiance. Eli didn't flinch. He'd expected resistance. At the Maple Hill house, he and Javier settled into a rhythm. Mornings were for coffee and planning, afternoons for meetings with the center's new inclusivity team. Eli poured himself into the work, designing programs that would have saved him as a kid, workshops for self-expression, counseling for those grappling with their identity. He hired Jenna as a coordinator, her art background perfect for leading creative sessions. She brought a warmth to the center that hadn't been there before, and kids started showing up, their eyes wary but hopeful. One afternoon, a lanky boy named Tyler lingered after a workshop, clutching a sketchbook much like Eli's old one. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You grew up here, and you made it?" Eli's throat tightened. He saw himself in Tyler's hunched shoulders, the way he glanced around as if expecting a blow. "Yeah," Eli said. "And you will too. This place, it's yours as much as anyone's." Tyler nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears, and left. Eli watched him go, feeling the weight of his own past and the promise of someone else's future. This was why he'd come back. But not everyone was inspired. Marcus Reed cornered Eli outside the hardware store one chilly morning, his face red with barely contained anger. "You think you can waltz in here, buy up our town, and call the shots," he spat. "That house was supposed to be mine." Eli didn't blink. "Then you should have bought it." Marcus stepped closer, his bulk intimidating, but Eli had faced worse in New York's theater world, directors with egos bigger than Broadway. "You're not welcome here," Marcus growled. "Never were." Eli's voice was ice. "Funny. I own the deed, and I'm not going anywhere." Marcus stormed off, but the encounter left a sour taste. Eli knew the Reeds wouldn't let it go. Sure enough, Sarah called that evening, her tone all business. "Marcus and Lisa Reed are serious about the house. Name your price." Eli laughed, short and sharp. It's not about money, Sarah. It's about who they are. She hung up, and Eli knew the game was escalating. He didn't care. He'd already chosen his first tenants, a young queer couple, Mia and Lauren, who ran a nonprofit for at-risk youth. They'd move in next month, their rent funding the center's programs. Marcus and Sarah would find out soon enough. That night, Javier found Eli sketching in the living room, his pencil flying over the page, a vision for a community theater at the center. "You're relentless," Javier said, settling beside him. "But you're also scaring me. This town, it's not ready for you." Eli set the pencil down, his hand finding Javier's. "It doesn't have to be. I'm ready for it." The next day, trouble came knocking. A group of locals, led by Marcus, showed up at the center, demanding a town meeting. "We want transparency," Marcus declared, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Who's this donor, and why is he dictating terms?" Eli stepped forward, his presence silencing the murmurs. "You know who I am," he said, "and you know why I'm doing this. If you don't like it, take it up with the board." The crowd shifted, some nodding, others glaring. Jenna stood at Eli's side, her voice steady. "The center's for everyone. Eli's making sure it stays that way." Marcus scoffed, but the crowd's energy was split. Some saw the truth in Eli's words. Others clung to their resentment. As the meeting ended, Eli felt the tide turning, but only slightly. Change was slow, and Willow Creek was stubborn. Back at the house, Javier pulled Eli into a hug. "You're doing it," he whispered. "But don't lose yourself in this fight." Eli buried his face in Javier's shoulder, the warmth grounding him. "I won't," he promised. But as he looked out at the valley, he knew the hardest battles were still ahead. Winter crept into Willow Creek, dusting the valley with frost. The community center's new programs were gaining traction, with kids like Tyler showing up regularly, their confidence growing with each session. Eli spent his days there, overseeing renovations and mentoring the teens, while Javier painted murals on the walls, bright, bold images of hope and defiance. But the town's undercurrent of resistance hadn't faded. One evening, Eli found a letter slipped under the Maple Hill house's door. No signature, just a typed note. "You don't belong here. Leave before you regret it." Javier read it over his shoulder, his jaw tight. "This is getting serious, Eli." Eli crumpled the note, his hands steady. "They're scared. That's all this is." But Javier wasn't convinced. "Scared people do stupid things. Promise me you'll be careful." Eli nodded, but his mind was already racing. He'd dealt with threats before, anonymous emails during his early days in New York, when his designs challenged the status quo. This was no different. He wouldn't back down. The next day, Mia and Lauren moved into the Maple Hill house, their laughter filling the space as they unpacked. Eli watched from the porch, a quiet pride warming him. They were the kind of people Willow Creek needed. Kind, driven, unafraid to be themselves. Sarah Klein drove by, her car slowing as she stared at the couple, her face a mask of frustration. Eli waved, his smile pointed. She sped off. At the center, the inclusivity programs were drawing attention beyond Willow Creek. A local news outlet ran a story, calling Eli the prodigal son reshaping his hometown. The article quoted him sparingly, but highlighted the center's new mission. It also mentioned the Maple Hill house, noting its new tenants and Eli's role as landlord. The backlash was immediate. Marcus Reed organized a protest outside the center, a small but vocal group waving signs. "Keep Willow Creek traditional." Eli watched from the window, his stomach churning. Jenna joined him, her voice low. "They're losing ground, Eli. This is them lashing out." He nodded, but the signs stung. They weren't just about tradition, they were about him, about who he was. Still, he saw Tyler and other kids watching from across the street, their faces defiant. That was enough to keep him going. The protest fizzled out, but Marcus wasn't done. He confronted Eli at the diner the next morning, sliding into the booth across from him. "You're tearing this town apart," he said, his voice low but venomous. "You think you're some savior, but you're just a kid with a grudge." Eli sipped his coffee, unruffled. "And you're just a bully who never grew up. I'm not here to fight you, Marcus. I'm here to fix what you broke." Marcus leaned forward, his voice a hiss. "You'll regret this." Eli met his gaze. "Try me." That night, The center's windows were smashed. Glass littered the floor, and one of Javier's murals was defaced with spray paint. Eli stood among the wreckage, his hands shaking with rage. Jenna arrived, her eyes wide. "This is too far," she said. "We need to call the police." Eli nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew Marcus was behind this, or at least his allies. The town was splitting, and Eli was the fault line. The police took statements, but no arrests were made. The vandalism only strengthened Eli's resolve. He organized a community cleanup, and dozens showed up: kids, parents, even some of the fundraiser skeptics. Tyler helped repaint the mural, his brush steady despite the cold. "You're not giving up, right?" he asked Eli. "Not a chance," Eli said, ruffling the kid's hair. As the center came back to life, Eli felt a shift. More locals were speaking out, supporting the programs. A few even apologized for their silence years ago. Mrs. Hargrove sent a note, stiff but sincere. "I was wrong to ignore your pain. I'm proud of what you're doing." Eli read it twice, unsure how to feel. Javier found him later, staring at the note. "You're changing them," he said softly. "Even the ones who don't want to change." Eli leaned into him, exhausted but hopeful. "Maybe, but I'm not done yet." Spring arrived, softening Willow Creek's edges with green. The community center was thriving, its programs drawing kids from neighboring towns. Eli's vision was taking root, a safe space where no one had to hide. But the vandalism hadn't stopped. Another window was broken, and hateful flyers appeared around town, targeting Eli and the center. He didn't tell Javier about the worst ones, the ones that mentioned their relationship with slurs he hadn't heard since high school. Jenna took charge of security, installing cameras and organizing volunteers to keep watch. "You've got more allies than you think," she told Eli, showing him a petition signed by over 100 locals supporting the center. "They're not all loud, but they're here." Eli was grateful, but the weight of the fight was wearing on him. Late at night, when Javier was asleep, he'd sit on the porch, staring at the valley, wondering if he'd pushed too far. Then he'd think of Tyler, of the kids who now had a place to belong, and he'd keep going. One morning, Sarah Klein showed up at the house, her usual polish gone. "Eli, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight. "Marcus is out of control. He's telling people you're ruining the town, that the center's a front for pushing your agenda." Eli crossed his arms. "And what do you think, Sarah?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "I think you're making things hard for people like me. But I don't agree with Marcus. Not anymore." It wasn't an apology, but it was close. Eli nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Then help me. Talk to the town. Tell them what the center's really about." Sarah agreed, reluctantly, and left. Eli wasn't sure he trusted her, but it was a crack in the wall. That afternoon, she posted on the town's online forum, defending the center's mission. The response was mixed. Some praised her, others called her a traitor. But it was progress. Meanwhile, Marcus escalated. He filed a complaint with the town council, claiming Eli's donation was a conflict of interest. The council dismissed it, but the move stirred up his supporters. At a tense town meeting, Marcus took the floor, his voice booming. "This isn't about inclusion. It's about one man forcing his lifestyle on us." Eli stood, his heart racing but his voice calm. "My lifestyle? I love someone. I built a life. And I'm giving back to a town that tried to break me. If that scares you, Marcus, that's your problem." The room erupted, some cheering, some shouting. Jenna grabbed Eli's arm, pulling him back as the council called for order. Later, she grinned. "You're a lightning rod, you know that?" Eli laughed, the sound weary but real. "Always have been." That night, Javier found Eli sketching again, this time a stage for the center's first community play, a musical about acceptance. "You're building something beautiful," Javier said, kissing his forehead. "But you're burning yourself out." Eli leaned into him, closing his eyes. "I can't stop, Javi. Not until it's done." The next day, a breakthrough came. Tyler's mother, a quiet woman who'd avoided the center, showed up with a tray of brownies. "My son's happier now," she said, her voice shaky. "Thank you." Eli's chest ached. This was what he'd fought for, small victories, one heart at a time. But as he thanked her, he saw Marcus across the street, watching. The war wasn't over. Summer bloomed. and the community center's first play was a triumph. The auditorium was packed, with kids like Tyler shining on stage, their voices carrying songs of love and resilience. Eli sat in the back, Javier's hand in his, tears prickling his eyes. The town wasn't whole yet, but it was healing. Marcus hadn't given up, but his influence was waning. Sarah's public support had shifted the tide, and more locals were speaking out, inspired by the center's work. Even Mrs. Hargrove volunteered, leading a writing workshop for teens. Eli watched it all, a quiet pride anchoring him. One evening, as the sun set over Maple Hill, Eli got a call from his lawyer. Marcus and Lisa Reed had applied to rent the house again, their application polished but desperate. Eli read it, then set it aside. He'd already chosen new tenants, a family with a trans daughter, eager to support the center. Marcus would find out soon. The final blow came at the next town meeting. Eli took the stage, his voice steady. 15 years ago, you laughed when I cried. Now I'm here, and I'm not leaving. This center, this house, they're for everyone who's ever felt like they don't belong. And I'm just getting started. The applause was thunderous, drowning out the few dissenters. Marcus stood in the back, his face a mask of defeat. Eli didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Later, on the porch, Javier pulled Eli close. You did it, he whispered. You changed this place. Eli looked out at the valley, the house glowing behind them. We changed it, he said. And we're not done. The laughter that once broke him was gone, replaced by a town learning to listen. Eli had bought their dream house, but more importantly, he'd built a home, for himself, for Javier, for every kid who'd ever cried in the dark. Willow Creek was his now, not because he owned it, but because he'd shown it how to love.